Good evening, everyone. Hope you're really, really well. And delighted to have Siobhan Goffee with me. I've almost said your Facebook name there, Siobhan. I recognise Siobhan's got one of these names like teachers and maybe people in police and stuff like that, but they don't
Yeah,
want people searching their names. So, yeah, you almost got your alter ego there. But how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm extremely happy to be here, and I'm happy that it's been sunny all day for the third day in a row. So I'm feeling pretty irrepressible, which is
Yeah,
probably a good thing for a conversation about joy.
100%. And you can probably see behind me, this room is absolutely sweltering at night as well. So what I found when we've had the nice weather come in, that I start to like sweat profusely like during the live, which I'm sure is lovely, like music to everyone's ears. But yeah, you can see the sun kind of shining, reflecting off my wallpaper just now. Um,
I think I might be joining you because I've just shut my window so you can't hear the revellers coming to and from the pub outside.
yeah, well, we've none of that, to be honest. Obviously we've been speaking off air, so to speak, but I managed to get my kids down at 7:15. Like, talk about joy, like a single dad tonight, but Jill's out at a course for the last few hours, so I was genuinely concerned that I wasn't going to get the kids to sleep. But yeah, bathed, fed, bed, absolute dream they were tonight. So
That
let's
is,
fingers crossed I don't jinx anything and they get out of bed just now. And what I had on one of the lives I was doing the other month is Murray was doing a poo, and of course you can just hear it because it's right next to the office. So
that was me. That was
oh,
me.
was it?
Yeah, Code
So it was. It
Brown.
was you and Len, wasn't it? Yeah, code brown indeed. So well, let's hope that it's not a common theme when I'm speaking to you. I guess you are.
I'm
There
the
we go.
poo denominator. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so like as you've alluded to, we're going to chat about all things joy, which I've got to be honest, as a subject, you might be looking at that and watching that and going, well, I know what joy is. Joy is for me, but we're going to chat a little bit about what joy is. How does that differ from kind of other names and phrases that we might use, like happiness and fulfillment and things like that? What it might look like for you, like where is joy in your life, how to go about finding it and identifying it, and why should we even prioritize it in the first place. But I guess before we get into some of that, do you want to just give the guys a kind of brief introduction to yourself, how you found joy, and kind of how did you introduce that into your coaching practice?
So basically, the joy came before the coaching, and it arose from a particularly joyless period of my life. So and it shouldn't have been that. That's the really big thing. Like, on the surface, everything looked pretty good. I'd got a great job. I was working for a world-leading university. I'd got a lot of friends where I lived. I was living in London. It was exciting. I was out, doing cultural pursuits all the time. But my family were great.
Was that in bars and restaurants, the cultural pursuits, or no?
Is that one? Sorry.
Is that bars and restaurants, the cultural pursuit? No,
I
in
don't
London,
know
no.
what you're talking about, Darren. Yeah, with maybe a smattering of theatre, like just to take the edge off. Yeah.
Just a bit.
But yeah, I should have been literally brimming over with joy, but in fact, I was really anxious. And feeling really joyless, to the point where I sat down at work one day and I was just planning a lecture. So it was something really simple I'd done 100 times before. My brain just went, yeah, I'm not doing that today. You aren't doing anything to support me, so I'm not supporting you. And I had this moment of like, am I losing my mind? I got like, what the hell is going on here? And I called up a friend who worked downstairs and just said, what's going on? And she was like, I think you need to have a little think about your life. What is going on that's making you feel like this? So, I mean, my solution to that was pretty extreme, because I jacked in my job, rented my flat, left the country, and went off to South America for a year without a word of Spanish. So it was kind of an extreme response. But that's where the focus on joy really began, because, not surprisingly, given that I was doing something really exciting, I was filled with joy. And Darren, it was actually like to a point where I thought, God, have I gone too far the other way? I'm feeling, it's almost like I feel so joyful. It's almost like a mania. Is that, so it was, and I was, it's easy in those situations. I was constantly being stimulated. I was living in Peru, in this, in Cusco, in the Andes. There was Incan ruins everywhere. I was totally in charge of my own time. I'd hiked the Inca Trail. I was doing all of these things that I'd always wanted to do. And so it's fairly easy to maintain your joy levels in that kind of situation. But I think what really interested me was, it wasn't like I was super duper happy all the time. So, I was traveling, I experienced diversity. There were a few little hair raising moments. Sometimes I was quite lonely. I was a little bit heartbroken at one point. But despite all of those things that you might see as big or negative emotions, it didn't stop me feeling joyful. And that was really interesting to me. So wait, I can feel joyful and these other things at the same time. What's going on?
And what was the pull for you? What was the pull for you to get across there in the first place? So, you're kind of sat at your desk. You're like, no, computer says no. Like literally, no, I'm not doing this anymore. It does seem quite an extreme response. Like, what was going through your head in terms of, right, that's enough? And why South America? Was there some connection there, or some reason that you chose there?
Two things. One was Tintin. So when I was a kid, I had this. I really liked Tintin, and I got with a book token one Christmas. I think it was called Tintin and the Empire of the Sun, and it was set in there was a rogue group of Incas that were still living somewhere in Peru, and I was really fixated with this book, and so I'd always been really interested in sort of the kind of Incan history, and that I'd always wanted to walk the Inca Trail. So that was one thing. And the other thing was that I really wanted to learn Spanish. I'd always wanted to learn Spanish. We did French at school. And so it seemed like the ideal opportunity to go somewhere where I'd have no choice but to do it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really think of anything I would want to do more than travel as well. I love to travel, So yeah, it kind of felt a bit like a no-brainer.
And how did you think, I guess, reflecting back on that? Because I would go and instantly I'd go, well, if I went and just jacked it all and went to Peru and was walking the Inca trails, I'd be probably pretty happy. Obviously, I've got my kids and wife that would absolutely miss just now. But let's assume that I didn't have that in a parallel life. I'd be I'd be totally full of joy as well. Similarly, what do you think there was kind of specifically about that trip that kind of spoke to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the one thing that just absolutely, well, there's two things that jump to mind. The first one is nature. Just the view from my room looked out across the city of Cusco to the Andes on the other side. I to see, in Incan culture, the mountains are gods. And that was, I am by no means a religious person, but that was quite easy to sort of feel. So it's that sense of awe. And I went to the Calca Canyon and saw condors, 10 condors flying overhead, those things kind of, that real sense of wonder and awe was there. It's interesting that I'd gone there because it was something I loved as a kid, because that's what I felt. I felt like a kid again. I was just so filled with boundless enthusiasm. So nature, history, those were big parts of things. My background is a history teacher. But the other thing was just the humanity. And there was something specifically about the fact that I couldn't communicate very well with people that makes you find more fun, inventive ways of communicating that are inherently joyful. If you ever noticed, if you don't share a language with someone, you often just end up hysterically laughing when you try to communicate with them. It's that kind of, there is something really joyful. And then the success when you understand each other and you don't even speak the same language, that as well. So there was definitely that. And the colour, everything just seemed bright and colourful, but that might have just been my mental state as well.
Yeah, but I suppose that's what travel does, though, doesn't it? Certainly from my experience, I wouldn't say I've travelled a whole lot, but even if you take it down to the micro level, see when lockdown hit, for example, we're working at our desks and we've got our own four walls, the joy you would get from going for a 5 or 10 minute walk just changes surroundings. It's incredible. And I think if you look at that, I guess in terms of, the other end of the spectrum, packing in your job and going, no, I'm away to the other side of the world. I guess that's what it's that's what it's similarly doing. Your travel, you're getting to see things from a different perspective, how people live, different cultures. You mentioned history, nature, humanity. You're going to see all of the differences, but also all the similarities we share as a human race as well. So
that's right. And there is, it is sort of, there's something about connection there, like, and one of the, if you look at sort of research on joy and definitions of joy, that connection is always part of it. So I was connected with nature, I was connecting with other people, and then there's something about growth there, like learning something new as well. That's inherently, well, I say growth is inherently joyful, but it can be quite scary and painful as well. So yeah, maybe that's not such an obvious one.
So then, thinking you're over there, when did you decide to come back? Was that purely financial? Like, okay, I've had enough now. I've went maybe too far. You were saying you were thinking, I need to get back to some form of normality. What was going through your head?
So I think if my finances had been able to support it, I definitely would have carried on for a bit longer. But there was also, like, I felt that I'd undergone such a big personal change in that time that I was sort of ready to see how it translated to the real world and to see what was next. And like, I definitely, like, it's a bit of a hackneyed old phrase in the coaching world, isn't it, this idea of a journey? But I definitely felt like I'd done the journey over there, but there was another whole journey that I needed to be ready to do when I got back here. And I mean, when I came back, I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. I suppose coaching was somewhere on a list of things that I thought I might like to do, but I hadn't, didn't come back and start my training. It was another 6 months before I did that. So, yeah.
So when you came back, did you go back straight into teaching, or did you just have a bit of time to just readjust? And how did that?
Well, I needed to earn money quick. So I went back into the wonderful world of supply teaching, which is like, I'd done 17 years in secondary schools. And like, one of my things was like behavior. If you had a new teacher and they wanted to see how to manage a difficult class, they'd send them to me. So I had this long career, and I like walked in as a supply teacher on day one, and I was sort of there a bit like, do you know who I am? And they were just like, we don't give a toss. We know who you are. You're the new teacher. So there was this like brilliantly sort of humbling thing of like having trained teachers after my 17 years as well, for 5 years. There I was then.
I'm going to take these off, Siobhan, because I don't know whether it's my Wi-Fi or whatever, but it's just kind of cutting out there. So these might be needing charge. Can you hear me okay still?
I can hear you. I've got no problem. I hope it's not mine.
I'm going to change my speaker. There we go. Have I got you?
Yeah, still there.
There we go. I've got you. Cool. So, sorry, I lost the last bit of that, Siobhan.
Just the humbling experience of having all this experience and walking in, and the kids are just like, you're the new girl. We don't care. We don't care. You're new. That's who you are.
and so I guess what changed? You'd said you went through this transition. You'd felt this connection and this joy, this attachment to joy. How did that then translate back here, particularly when you went into being the new girl again, I guess, and from a work perspective? Yeah.
So as I had imagined, and particularly doing a job like teaching, which I don't get me wrong, I always loved teaching, but it is highly challenging, especially in terms of workload. And I could feel fairly quickly that this kind of my joy reserves, which I had built up, were absolutely brimming full, were starting to kind of go under the weight. And the thing about joy is that it needs to evolve as a practice for you as an individual for it to work. And so, that practice of experiencing joy is about noticing it. And straight away, I could feel myself getting overwhelmed by my work life, my need to earn money, need to make decisions about career change. And so it became really important to actually look into this idea more and think that it must be possible to maintain those feelings of joy and even in normal life. So how am I going to do it? And so at that point, I kind of started researching in earnest what I sort of felt inherently to be true, to see if I was right, really.
Yeah. So is that when you found coaching then? I know certainly, like I talk a lot about with clients around understanding themselves, so their values, their life roles, like trying to unpick, I guess, who they are at their core. I was doing a podcast recording today and reflecting on something I'd heard, a lovely analogy that as humans, the human equivalent of the dog bum sniff is, what do you do for a living? And it's like, I'm a teacher, I'm an accountant, or I'm a coach. And we just put labels on things when actually the more important stuff is the layers underneath that around, like, so who are we, what inspires us, what energizes, what's our passions, what are the things we're enthusiastic about, what do we really love, and it's that which I think, like, without kind of, I suppose, leading you into that space, but I wonder, can you find joy without truly understanding all of that stuff as well?
Well, I think like getting to know your own joy is a process that you have to sort of engage in with intentionally. You know, you have to do it on purpose, basically. And it's funny you should talk about values, because of course, the minute you start training to be a coach, straight away you do your core values. And guess what my number one core value is? It was joy. And it was kind of that exact exercise that helped me put a name to what it was that I'd been experiencing and what it was that I'd been thinking about. I'm not sure I'd really called it that up to that point, but when that came up, I was like, that's it. And then, you know, my other core values were things like community, learning. So there was a lot of links there that kind of all sort of came together at that one time.
So something that I wrote down and I'm really interested to get your view on it is the interpretation of different words, because you'll know, like, as I've said, with the labels that we apply for even our jobs, it can mean, like, you know, completely different things. But where does joy differ, like, to happiness or fun, I guess? For what's the difference between? Can you help kind of separate that?
Yeah, that was really interesting to me as well, Darren, because there's so much talk, isn't there, about happiness, and we all, you know, every coaching client that I have ever worked with actually wants, underneath whatever they've come for, is just to be a bit happier. It's human nature, isn't it? We just want to be as happy as we can be, whatever that might mean for us. But when I started looking at it, so it's only quite recently that joy's been researched separately. So it was sort of just lumped in with happiness and assumed to just be part of it. But in fact, there's some sort of, joy is part of happiness, but happiness is kind of is more holistic, it's longer term, and it often feels a bit like happiness has kind of more conditions to it as well. Like, I'll be happy when I get that next qualification. I'll be happy when I meet the right woman. Oh, but you know that. So that's often how we think of happiness. There's something maybe over there, you know, like that you're working towards. Yeah. Perhaps even there's a bit of striving going on there to be happier. And it's also a bit existential, isn't it? Like, if you ask yourself, "Am I happy?" That's a really difficult. Well, I'm really happy in my relationship, but actually, I kind of intellectually, I'm not that stimulated at the moment. Or, you know, I'm really happy with my physical achievements, but so that, you know, it's harder to pin down. And joy is like this kind of like romping little toddler of a type of happiness, where it's right there, it is in the moment, it's all around us. So joy is there all the time, as long as you can notice it, and you know it's joy because you can feel it. So joy exists in your body. There's like you'll smile, you'll laugh, you might cry. Sometimes you have joyful tears, don't you? You might do this face, that kind of face of awe and wonder, but there will be a physical reaction. You might have the hairs on your arms might stand up, but when you are experiencing joy, then you will know it. It's just that a lot of the time we stop paying attention to that, and because it is something fleeting, it's easy to miss it if you don't stop and have a little look around every now and again. And
is it more accidental as well? I guess, would most people kind of find that joy, they're not even looking for it, it just kind of happens to them, and is part of kind of your work in helping people be more overt with finding joy in their life each day? I know you do daily, like you like have hashtag daily joy. If anyone checks out Siobhan, you'll see her on Instagram talking about daily joy. But yeah, is that kind of, is it about being more overt with that, so you don't miss the days and get joy from somewhere, like every single day?
So it's sort of a mixture of the two, because on the one hand, it's there all the time. It is accessible to you. You don't have to ask for joy. You just take it. Like no one can. Well, actually, I mean, historically, people do try and stop you feeling joy. But we might come on to that later. But if you have a mind to, you can notice it. But where it becomes difficult is that people get overwhelmed by other things that block out that kind of the time that you need to just savor that moment. It's about savoring a moment. Like a joy practice is like, oh, there it is, right? Rather than just rushing off for the bus, I'm just going to spend another 5 seconds going, oh, that was brilliant. Like that bird song that's really cheered me up, or that old lady smiling at me, that's, you know, saying she liked my dress, that's really made my day. So it's just like enjoying it, savoring it, really.
Yeah, there's something in that as well, that sometimes you might feel a little bit uncomfortable or fleeting, and you're kind of like, no, like recognize it and hold on to it, almost expand the moment slightly and kind of just really like soak it in.
Yeah, but there's something else in what you said there as well. So Brené Brown talks about foreboding joy, and it's this idea that actually, and when I do my course, what quite often happens is when I start asking people to sort of identify and recognize their joy, they either become really like joyful, or sometimes they start to feel quite sad or quite ill at ease. And it's this idea that joy makes you incredibly vulnerable, because it like joy involves like big emotions like hope and awe and wonder and things that, and possibility, and things that like could be taken away from you. So it is to truly experience joy, you need to be vulnerable, and we are hardwired to protect ourselves from anything scary happening. So there is this sort of so the example that she gives is a parent watching their child sleep. So their child is there, this beautiful, perfect thing that you've created, that is there sleeping safe in bed in front of you. And almost exactly as you experience that joy, you might have that feeling of like, oh my God, something bad might happen to them. Like the two like live alongside each other. Or you meet someone new, you really like them, but actually you're terrified. You know, so what we do is we cut off to avoid the real lows. We are prepared to not experience the highs, and we live in this little middle lane that has pain like managed, but in doing that you're also cutting out joy, because you cannot experience emotions like joy unless you're prepared to risk experiencing the opposite of that. And you can't stop bad things happening. So there is something inherently really vulnerable about experiencing joy that can make it quite hard and quite a challenge sometimes.
It's quite insightful, that. I think I can't relate to ever thinking, like, I guess when I'm looking at my kids, but I do think there's an element of, oh, wow, they're getting so big and they're growing up so fast. And like, you know, if I lift my daughter into bed, I'm like, how many more years will I be able to lift her physically into bed? And I'm going to need to do some deep gym work to work on the buttons to keep doing that. But yeah, something in what you said there around the fact that life is about peaks and troughs. It's going to be full of moments of like real joy and, like, let's be honest, pretty shit times, suffering. And you see right throughout history the type of stuff that we've been able to do as a human species. It's like we've had fantastic success and you know, in terms of what we've been able to achieve, but we've also like had created horrific events for people and created suffering for others. And that suffering is kind of probably what you're saying is that's always going to be there, but we're almost defending ourselves from reaching the peaks of joy so that we don't go into the real depth. But actually that's nonsensical, right? Because yeah, we can't control everything. You know, ultimately we are finite as human beings. We are going to love, you know, people in our families, our friends, you know, loved ones, etc. They are going to die at some point, is the reality of it. So we're going to go through that struggle with suffering and real heartache and and difficult times. So why not appreciate the good times while they're there?
Yeah, and the irony and the beauty of like developing joy as a practice is the very thing that can make it hard, like this, or one of the things that can make it hard, this idea of foreboding joy, because we fear the bad things happening and we can't stop them. Actually, a joy practice is a remedy for that, because whilst experiencing tiny fleeting moments of joy is clearly not going to, it's not going to stop the pain of losing a loved one, or, like feeling insecure because you've just been made redundant, or any of those really difficult things that we experience. But what it does do is, in these minute by minute moments of just savoring that joy, you build up these reserves that help you to be resilient. It won't stop you feeling pain, but it might help you to just ride it out. Because like I was saying before, those two emotions can go alongside each other. I used to teach RE, Darren, as well as history, and we used to do a unit which was on death, basically. What do different religions teach about death? And we used to show this video, and part of it was set in a hospice. So it was people at end of life who were terminally ill, and there was this one clip, and I've never forgotten it. It's always just stuck in my mind. So it was someone in the last days of their life that they interviewed, and she said, I don't know whether she used the word joy, but it's definitely what she was talking about. She was saying, even though I'm in pain and I know I'm going to die, like when the sun comes through the window and shines on me, like the warmth of the sun on my face just makes me, is a moment of joy, basically. So even in the midst of suffering, you can have joy. And that is why joy, my course is called Joy is an Act of Resistance. And that is why joy is resistant. It's an act of resistance, because you are managing to find something good even in the darkest of moments.
Yeah, it's so interesting you're saying, like, I've just in the last few days, it's a book I've never read, but it's a short book, but Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. But he's I guess professor or lecturer or of some kind, but psychotherapist, I guess, and he was in concentration camps. So the first half of the book, or the book's really about his experience in the camps, and he talks about fulfillment the same way I guess you're talking about joy, but he says there's three ways that you can find fulfillment. You can find it through doing things like your vocation, your work, like your service to people. You can find it through people, like people you love. You can find fulfillment through others. And then he mentioned what you've said there in suffering. He goes, you absolutely can find fulfillment and meaning in your life through suffering. But when he talks about it, it's interesting. I'm reflecting, listening to you just now on some things that he said, but you could interpret where he was saying, like, the rations that they got during the day, if you got a couple of extra potatoes or something like that, or a cigarette, they were moments that were extremely important to him. And he was like, this like absolutely fantastic. So he didn't actually go into talking about joy, but I actually wonder now, that's actually what you're talking about. Even in the depths of suffering, his part of his premise was about, yes, being able to survive it, so that part of that fulfillment and his meaning was through the fact that he had survived it. But in the moment, that allowed him to find and focus on things that he just had the smallest little glimmer of joy, I guess. But it's interesting. I don't think he uses the word joy, but I think that's what he was meaning.
I think the link between joy and hope is such a strong one, because if you can feel joyful, you can feel hopeful. And part of this idea of joy being resistance, when I started reading, sort of what coincided with a lot of the reading I was doing was the Black Lives Matter movement around the death of George Floyd. And there was so much talk about how to sustain activism and what do you do, like when the world is grinding you down. And I mean, what a period of time that that we might all experience that at the moment. So when the world is grinding you down and feels pretty hopeless, you feel like if you're not angry all the time, what have you got left? Like, you've got to keep fighting, and there's nothing wrong with anger. There's a lot of things in the world to be angry about, and anger can be used very effectively, but there's this feeling that people had, that they felt guilty to have any downtime, because they felt like or to celebrate anything positive, because it was like, but look at all this bad stuff, like in saying this joyful thing or doing this joyful thing, am I saying I don't care? Am I just being so individualistic that it means I don't care anymore? And of course, the answer to that is, I mean, well, it could do, but it's highly unlikely that if someone is like trying to oppress you or make you less, then what better thing to do as an act of resistance than to not let them do that? So I was just thinking, when you were talking about the Holocaust, about sort of stories of people like celebrating Hanukkah in Auschwitz, for instance, like that is experiencing joy as an act of resistance. And there's like authoritarian and oppressive regimes, the first thing they go for to control the people is joy, right? So get rid of music, get rid of dancing, control sex, all the things that might bring joy in people's lives, control who you can have a relationship with. They're really common in just across the board, whether that's right wing, left wing, religious, whatever. So yeah, there is something. I mean, when I started doing coaching and I started getting into the sort of wellness and wellbeing side of it, I was like, oh, it's not very political. It's a bit fluffy. Is it just a bit wishy-washy? Do I really want to be that person? But like, what I've kind of come to realize is that, like, looking after yourself in that way can be quite a political act as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the title of it, Joys and Acts of Resistance, and we'll come and talk about a bit more about your course like in a bit, but the title of it does sound quite political and like I wouldn't say aggressive, but it's almost like so what, like the resistance, what as I understand it, it's like, no, it's for you. You're pushing back to say, do you know what? Life is going to be tough, right? And yeah, like right now, I think it's something that's probably more important than ever, really, around like what people are struggling with. And we've got a duty to ourselves to keep joy at the forefront of our mind.
Yeah.
And I think, like, looking into science, I know in terms of like being happy and the feelings of like the chemical release that you'll get when you're feeling joyful as well. Those are the things that we actually need. Particularly you mentioned anger there. If we're angry all the time and we've got this stress response and cortisol going into our bodies, that's going to affect how, like, our health, our diet, what we eat, like it's going to affect our sleep patterns, because stress, we're kind of hardwired to think, oh, I maybe need to wake up in the middle of the night because a hunter's going to come in and attack me and stuff like that. But that's what stress doesn't. The body only reacts to the things that it can. It can't interpret, right? Oh, I'm stressed because of X, Y, Z. It just reacts to the chemicals you're doing. So, tell me a bit about, like, from the act of resistance, I guess, from a science or research point of view, in terms of like how what's that doing to you on a daily basis, I guess, when you're going and finding that.
So I think it's almost a way to. I've been reading a lot about the stress cycle recently. If you read, there's a really good book by Emily and I can't remember what her sister's called, Nagoski. I think it's called Burnout, but right. they talk a lot in that about ways to complete the stress cycle for exactly the reasons that you just said, that our body can't differentiate between us being really stressed out about our contract at work and someone or something trying to kill us, right?
Yeah. It doesn't know. It just goes like it releases the same thing. So yeah, that's bad for us, right? It's not bad for us. It's appropriate in the right response, but it's useless if we've got that constantly going into our bodies all the time. Yeah,
right. And that's the thing, is it's sustained. So the thing that was a threat would have gone away if you ran or fought or whatever. But the things that we're talking about that are stressful are things that might go on for months or even years, and therefore that impact on our body is like, it's grueling. That's it's linked to heart disease, it's linked to all sorts of cancers, all sorts of things. And so they talk about the fact that you need to actually shut down that response in the moment, even when the threat is still present. And I think that kind of having a practice of sort of joy spotting, if you like, it fits into that, because what it means is because you can experience a negative emotion or a stressful situation or whatever, and simultaneously experience joy, if you take literally a few seconds to notice it, then what that means is, even if you can't get rid of the stressor, so let's say, for instance, it's your work, you can't get rid of it straight away, your career change might be a longer process, you can start working straight away on removing that stress, and dealing with your body's stress reaction. And so I kind of see like a practice of joy in line with that. And I suppose you could see it as like a sort of form of meditation in some way. It's definitely highly linked to gratitude and mindfulness. And then it's inherently linked to connection. So whether that be connection with nature, whether that be connection with other human beings, and one of a surefire way to cut across the stress cycle is to connect. So in this book, they talk about like ideally you would be with people that you feel safe with, and you get them to give you a hug for 20 seconds or more, because at that point your body starts to respond. It needs to be like a long kind of hug that's given and received the same amount. It can't be you just slumping on someone. It's got to be an active kind of hug that makes you feel safe. But obviously,
I'm going to tell Jo that later on. She's not a big hugger, so I'm going to tell her that when she gets in, and just see the response. Listen, it's got to be 20 seconds. Siobhan said it has to be right. So.
Oh, Darren, I've got to tell you this. My mum's going to kill me. I keep mentioning stuff she said when I do these things, but like, this really cracked me up. So I was telling her about this, the 20-second hug, and we hadn't seen each other for nearly a year. So first, she's had her 2 injections now. I've had 1, and I was like, can we hug? And she was like, yeah, go on then. So I said, can we hug for 20 seconds? And I told her why, and she goes, yeah, all right then. So I hugged her for 20 seconds, and at the end I went, oh, Mum, that was lovely, Mum. I feel so much better than you. And she goes, no, I just did it for you.
Yeah. Your mum sounds like she's very similar mindset to my wife.
Really made me laugh. But yeah, what were we talking about? Yeah, so the stress cycle. So to me, the beauty of that is that you can start to manage it. Oh, connection, that's what I was talking about. Yeah. So yeah, if you can't get your 20-second hug from a loved one, then do something else that will make you feel safe and accepted and like you're in a safe place, away from the saber-toothed tiger. So she suggested connecting. So like saying hello to someone, smiling at someone, paying them a compliment, doing any of those things to just provide that connection. And that is also something that is a way of promoting and sharing joy. So when I was talking about like being joyful on purpose, it's stuff like that. Going, like I have to get up at 10 to 5 in the morning on a Wednesday, not today, it's half term, to go into school to coach kids in Bristol.
I was going to say, you look very awake for if you were up at 10 to 5 this morning. That's even early for me. So
let me tell you, I would be in bed by now if it had been one of those days. But so, the last thing you feel like doing is being sociable. But I was like, yeah, feeling a bit joyless getting up at this time. So I always say hello to the guy who's on the platform. I smile, he smiles, we're both happy. Connection, instant joy, take a moment to savor it. So there's a real link there between diffusing that stress cycle and the sorts of practices that are part of kind of joy spotting and developing joy as an actual intentional practice.
And is this quite trying to think of the right word, I guess, from an evolutionary point of view, right? We can't have developed, our brain's not developed to know what these things are and how they help, but yet we use them in certain ways to kind of almost hack some of the same emotions that we that we need. But if you go back kind of thousands of years, I guess, which is how our brains have evolved, really, they're quite still similar in that place thousands of years ago. I guess you're talking about human connection, physical connection, seeing someone with your own eyes, not over a screen, not a like or a share, on a Facebook post or an Instagram post. So I'm assuming there's connection, there's specific types of connection. It wouldn't be, go on social media and put a post and sit there and see how many likes you get. I'm assuming there's certain rules to that.
That's a really good point, Darren. I've never thought about that explicitly, and I've never read anything explicitly linked to joy about that. But to me, it makes perfect sense, because the aim of a joy practice is to savor the moment, and what is the opposite of savoring in a moment is flicking through your screen, isn't it? Go backwards and forwards and never stopping for long enough to really enjoy it. So I think, I don't know, I've got mixed feelings about that, because I must say that since most of my coaching career since it's really taken off, that has happened in a lockdowns, you know, in a sort of like a COVID situation, which has meant it's almost all been online. I've been amazed at the connections that has been possible to make, but that is very different than getting a like from a stranger.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, the specific difference is the time and the savouring of it, rather than the quick fix.
Yeah, there's a sentiment. So it's not a like, it's, you know, on a post or even a share or something like that. There needs to be at least some element of connection, but, you know, it could be a message back and forth.
Yeah.
Or it could be a Zoom call like what we're doing just now. But yeah, it's more about the type and making sure that connection's there. If it's just a fleeting like or share or something like that, then that's unlikely to give you that kind of joy.
Yeah, because there's not much humanity in that, is there? Those things, I don't know, the kind of those electronic likes and shares, there's not. Maybe it can do, but I just think the way that it's been set up in order for us to consume it is not about quality and savouring and all of those wonderful things. It is about the next quick fix that's going to make you buy something. You know, let's be honest, it's how long can I keep you on the screen so you'll see my advert? That's, you know, we've all watched the, what is it, the Social Network or whatever it's called, the terrifying documentary.
Yeah, it's absolutely scary. So that's it. So joy spotting, something that you do, it needs to have connection, needs to be, you know, to do with human nature. We can use technology to get there, but we need to be careful with what we're interpreting as finding joy. So tell me a bit more about your course then. So joy is an act of resistance. I love the title. It really provocative, stands out, and gets you to go like, that's really curious. Like what would but I understand that concept now. So what does that look like? Why would people choose to go onto that course?
Yeah. So the aim of the course is to set you up so that you will go away with a toolkit and a practice that you can use in your everyday life. So that's like one of the number one aims of doing the course, is that you have something to live by. Is a bit hyperbolic, but you know what I mean. Like you have a tool that you can take away that you can use so that you can maintain the gains that you've made. So that's one kind of, that's the biggest part of it. The second thing is it had to be a group coaching course, because joy is just profoundly based on the idea of connection and sharing. And so what we do first of all is we actually haven't even talked about this, but I can see time's really ticking on. But we look at we just get people to explore their own joy, so they know what theirs looks like, so that when they want to stop and see it, they can do it. So there's a lot of looking into what brings you joy and really thinking about it and getting really clear on that. But in a group scenario where you can share it, it just adds a whole other dimension, because people mention things that are joyful to them that you wouldn't even think of. So like my favorite type of joy, I've got a prop, I brought it with me. My favorite type of joy is disproportionate. Is disproportionate joy. So it's that, like, when you get a ridiculous amount of joy out of something that someone else, they'd be like, what are you talking about? So for me, I get disproportionate joy from a lot. I'm quite good at this, but I get disproportionate joy from having a boiled egg. Well, I love a boiled egg. And when I got them in Peru, it was a standard breakfast. It was never quite as joyful as when I had it at home. And the reason is because it's got a special little thing that goes with it. It's got a little house to live in. So you put your egg in, you knock it on the head, you take its little hat off. I mean, come on, like I loved it as a kid, but if I'm really honest, I still love it just the same now. And then how much more joyful does that egg in an egg cup become when it's got a little cozy to go with it? Like that, to me.
I don't think I've ever seen that, but
That is, you're clearly not feeling my joy so much there, Darren, but that to me, that's my disproportionate joy. Come on, you must have one. Something that
You know what? I made, and this is terrible because I've got like a 3 and 4 year old, but I made the wee man boiled egg like a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I don't eat eggs, so like we've got them. Generally, they're just used for baking cakes. But I was like, oh, you know what? You really like a boiled egg, and you dip your soldiers. And he's like, soldiers, yeah. So we'll get onto that. And I was looking around, and we don't have an egg cup, so we must have thrown it out, or it's in storage up in a loft or something because we downsized when we came here. So like we definitely used to have egg cups. So I need to find one, but I don't think I've ever seen an egg cup holder, an egg like to keep it warm. It's like a wee cozy. I love that.
An egg cozy. I know. So that is an example of disproportionate joy. And there's a woman who does podcasts that involve a lot of joy stuff, and her disproportionate joy is reading crappy magazines that are like, you know, full of celebrity gossip, which she inherently thinks are wrong, but she also really likes. So she reads them at the counter and then puts them back and doesn't buy them. And that is her disproportionate joy. She goes away just like thinking, yeah, I'm winning. I got to read
feeling bad or naughty or something like that. I know like Jill gets the hand down from her mum, like Max, she won't go and buy them, but she'll read them like a month or two later and stuff like that. And she's like, I just need this as a little bit of a like, and it's also, I think, to keep up with some of her friends who might talk about it. So she understands something of the world of celebrity, whatever that is. But yeah, I like absolutely. So like I love that. So group coaching, it's a toolkit for finding joy. For me, it sounds a bit like almost you're facilitating that habit formation because it is a practice. It's not going to be something that you'll say, oh, joy, like I know what it is, but purposeful joy, like going out there and overtly looking for it is very different to, oh, like I found happiness in something or I laughed at something the other day. It's about being present and kind of going, no, like I'm going to be looking for it. And if you're looking for it once in a day, you're probably going to end up finding it in several points throughout the day, right?
It snowballs. It snowballs. So yeah, there's that element of it of like, do you know what yours looks like? And that can be quite an emotional experience for people because they might not have given that any attention for a really long time. Then there's the like, what blocks your joy and how can you manage those blockers? So, you know, like productivity culture and being busy, feeling guilty about feeling joy, like imposter syndrome, stress, all of anxiety, all of those things. And then how you can kind of try to overcome. And for the first step is actually recognizing those and then realizing that you can work around them and still experience that joy. So there's that. And then my favorite bit of the course is the Joy Project. So having got to know your joy and like started to think about what blocks your joy and shared that with the group and heard all their brilliant ideas, they have 2 one-to-one coaching sessions as part of the course. So I think it's in week 4 and week 6 of the 8 weeks. And the idea of that is that they have done their joy list. They've worked out a list of joyful things they'd like to do, and they're going to pick one and they're going to make a plan to make that joyful thing happen. And I mean, sometimes it's something really, really small. I mean, it might even just be embedding your joy practice. That might be your joy project because you're like, I have to have this down. But I've had someone planning a joyful holiday space, so that when they go away, they can like maximize their joy. I had someone planning a social enterprise so that the joy gets shared through setting that up. So there's all sorts of things that you could do there, and there's no hierarchy. You could do whatever feels important to you. And like, yeah, when do you ever just spend 2 hours with someone listening to you, getting ideas of how you're going to plan to just experience joy?
Yeah. I mean, there's even joy in that process. Like there's something definitely for me about the anticipatory effect of something you're going to go and do that you enjoy. Like we have the same impression as fear. We know that the fear of doing something is always worse than the fear of the fear of doing it is worse than actually doing it. The doing it kind of disappears. But it's the exact same for like going on holiday. Like at the moment we're we're going to be booking Disney World, hopefully for next year. And I've been a couple of times. Jill and the kids have never been, and I'm more excited for them and just the thought of going and them experiencing it than I probably will do when I'm there, or at least it'll be on par. So I think even just like being able to think about all the things that you could do and get to do, that in itself is really cathartic and joyful, really.
And there you go, Darren. You've just given a perfect example of the multiplication of joy. Like, you have already experienced it and it's brought you joy, but the fact that you're going to be seeing it through someone else's eyes just multiplies the joy. And then your excitement about them seeing it is going to rub off on them, and they're going to be like, this is going to be really good, isn't it? So like, you've just got like that magnifying effect that joy begets joy, basically.
Yeah, I've got to do it. A bit of job on them. To be honest, they don't need too much excitement. The kids are already like, they think they're going to Disney World next week, but yeah, and it's something that, like, about, you mentioned it needs to be like a kind of group coaching because of this element of connection. But I almost think as well, it can feel quite awkward and self-indulgent to be focusing on ourselves. We don't tend to do it that often, but it kind of normalizes it if everyone else is doing it that we see. So if we're in a group environment and we see kind of people sharing things, we're more likely to open up. So it sounds like such a fantastic course, and 8 weeks long. So, you know, you're recruiting for that just now, are you?
I am. So it goes live. Will start on the 10th of June. So what's that? Next Thursday. That's what going to be. That will be our first. That will be joy number 1. So yeah. I'm really excited about it. I did it. The last time I did it, the feedback was really joyful, and it just made me even more excited to kind of do it a second time around and start sharing that. The other thing is, as a result of doing the course the first time, I've also set up a Facebook group called the Joy Collective, which is like, it's like Starter Joy. So you go in and you share your daily joys. And then there's like input from me about, you know, managing joy blockers and kind of sort of the meaning behind some of these joyful experiences and so on. So that has been lovely to do as well. So if there's anyone out there that fancies just like a bit of joy light, they can come and dip in and see if they like it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, make sure to, like, if you don't, I'll get the details from you, and I'll drop them in the link below for anyone watching. And yeah, like, fantastic. I guess, like, if that's something like leading up to the summer, like, how many people would go and get a PT, for example, and get in shape for summer? But I can't think of anything better if you've got some summer holidays to look forward to. Like, I always find out going a 2-week holiday, the first week I'd never be switching off. I'd take a week to switch off from work and relax. You know, imagine if you were able to kind of manage your stress levels on a daily basis by having a proactive kind of course that helps you find joy in the moment, manage your kind of mindset and state of mind, I guess, up until the summer holidays, so you can actually go and bloody enjoy it as well. So
save every moment. That's so true what you say about it takes a couple of days to wind down, doesn't it, for your holidays? It's, yeah,
like the office, the guilt, like, have I handed over, and all the work that kind of leads up to the summer break as well. Is that in itself can be stressful. So what a fantastic time to be able to do it. And with the sun shining in Glasgow, there's probably that's the only thing that really needs to happen for me to find joy, to be honest.
I tell you what, I have had no difficulty spotting my joy in the last 3 days, that's for sure. I just wake up, look out the window and go, woohoo!
Yeah, that's it.
Have a funny day. Yeah.
But listen, that's been fantastic. It's been fantastic kind of talking to you about that and, like, listening more about your course. So make sure you drop the comments below, so anyone, I guess, that's looking for it, you can reach you on Instagram. What's your handle again on Instagram?
sgoff72, that's SGOFF 72 on Instagram, and SJG Coaching on Facebook.
And is your Joy Collective, is that open to everyone?
Joy Collective is open to everyone. You just need to tell me you want to join, answer a couple of questions, and then I'll let you in.
So even if you don't want to sign up for your course, if you just want to understand a bit more about how you can get more joy in your life, get surrounded by positivity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, who doesn't want to be surrounded by more positivity and joy? Then yeah, go and check that out as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll make sure all of them go in the comments below. And yeah, it's been fantastic talking to you, Siobhan.
Thanks for having me on, Darren. I've loved it.
Yeah, not at all. Anytime. We'll need to get you back on as well. You can't have enough joy in the world, right?
You literally can't. It's not possible.
Right, take care all. Have a great night.
See you, Darren.